Hey, welcome back everyone into the NGK Tech Garage. Today we're just going to do a really quick follow-up video from the live broadcast that was aired yesterday. The 06 Sienna is all back together, mouse nest cleaned out, intake bolted back down, new gaskets, new coolant. When I was in there, I went and threw a set of spark plugs in right away too, because the intake has to be off to do a set of plugs, so I went ahead and took care of those right away for the customer as well. So the car is back to running perfect, no check engine light on. I do have the knock sensors hooked up on the lab scope. We'll look at it on the scan tool as well again. But first, before we get to that, I want to answer the t-shirt giveaway question, and I also want to answer I want to answer one question from the broadcast, and then one I want to do a little quick demonstration of. So the question was asked of what does EGR or even VVT have an effect on knock, on engine knock? Well, anything that's going to increase your cylinder temperature is going to create or lead to knock or detonation. When those end gases in the cylinder get incredibly hot, they ignite and the pressure pulses bounce and hit the combustion event, okay? So if we have a lack of EGR, a stuck closed EGR valve, or a VVT system that's not functioning, we're not overlapping the exhaust valve properly, then we can end up with our cylinder temperatures going up, which creates NOx gas, but it also can lead to detonation and knock. So there, our knock sensor would pick up that signal, and the PCM would retard the ignition timing, okay? So EGR being stuck closed can cause cylinder temperatures to go up and create detonation, okay? The other comment was to scope the sensors and watch if you were to tap on the block. Some vehicles, they may respond. Now with this one, I've had it idling, I've had it up at RPM, and I've tapped on the block trying to simulate knock, and because it's not that right frequency, I'm unable to get the PCM to react and retard the ignition timing. So we'll show that in just a second. I'll tap on the block and we'll see it respond on the lab scope, but we're not going to see the car do anything at all. All right, t-shirt giveaway question. Tech A said that the knock sensor is a sensor that's used to advance ignition timing in the event of knock or pinging. And that's incorrect, right? We want to retard the ignition timing. We want to make the ignition event happen later because we want to not give we don't want the combustion event to happen too early. If it happens too early, we're bringing that piston up, we're building that pressure and that heat up too early, and those end gases can spontaneously combust, okay? So we want that ignition event to happen later to prevent that detonation from happening, okay? Tech B said that a knock sensor is not used to prevent pre-ignition, okay? This was kind of a double negative type question, but basically we're saying here that the knock sensor is not going to do anything for pre-ignition, and that's true because if you think about it, if our engine is knocking, we retard the ignition timing, right? Knock or detonation occurs after the spark event. Pre-ignition is just like it sounds, the ignition event. So retarding the ignition timing, changing the time of when the spark plug actually fires, is not going to do anything for an event that's starting before the ignition event even begins, okay? So pre-ignition is not going to be controlled or monitored by the knock sensor. The frequency that pre-ignition happens is also different than the frequency at which detonation happens. They're going to be different ringing pulses throughout the engine. The engine is tuned to the knock sensor and the PCM are tuned to recognize knock or detonation, not pre-ignition. So the correct answer for this was B. I did have quite a few correct answers. I will be getting emails either today or on Monday to you guys. I'm going to respond to every email, and the top 5 who got it in fast enough are going to be winning a t-shirt. I'll announce those winners in the next broadcast. All right, so let's take a look. I do have the key turned on right now. Let's take a look at the lab scope, and you can see that we are right where we're supposed to be, okay? We don't have 2 different looking channels here. If we move this up, you guys can see that it's just hiding behind the other one, and they are both right at 2.27 volts, 2.4 volts, somewhere right in there. So they're right where they need to be, right at that bias voltage level where they're supposed to be, where we would expect them to be. So let's go ahead and I'm going to fire this thing up and we'll take a look at what it looks like on the scan tool. So on the scope, it looks still pretty normal, but let's go over to the scan tool now and we'll go ahead and we'll graph these out. Actually, we'll go graph view. We're sitting at about 12 degrees advance at idle. The engine is currently warm because I did have to bleed the cooling system, so it is warm. Let me go ahead, I'm going to bring it up to, I believe it's 3,000 RPM that we did yesterday on here. So here we go. All right, so there's 3,000 RPM. Let's see what our ignition advance was. And oh, we hit 45 degrees of advance here. So I believe last time we peaked at 39 degrees. So we got a little bit more advance. Let's jump over to the lab scope right now. And you'll see that both of our sensors did make some noise. But again, it's low frequency, low amplitude noise here, okay? So they're doing something, but they're not doing anything that's going to flag a knocking condition, okay? Now let's take and let's see if we can get this thing to react. I do have a hammer out here, so if we go under the hood right now, I'm going to just tap on this lightly, see if we can get any response. Unfortunately, the knock sensor is on the other side in the intake. All right, let's bring the lab scope up and see if we can see a response on here. Nothing on the valve cover. So, not really getting any response out of this. Everybody was mentioning how you should knock on the block and see if your sensor responds. Maybe that's a response right there, hard to say. But I don't have an air hammer here. My air hammer's at home, unfortunately. But you could try maybe an air hammer on the block, see what that does. But if we look at the scan tool, we had no drastic response out of the ignition advance. We didn't all of a sudden go and retard the timing or anything like that. I'm not able to fool the computer into thinking this thing is knocking. And I actually, when I was setting up for this class initially, we can bring it back to the main, there you go. When I was setting up for this class initially, I actually took a knock sensor, plugged it into the harness, and I ran it with the impact against the sensor, and I still wasn't able to fool this PCM into thinking that it was knocking to be able to show you guys the ignition retard function that the PCM is able to do. So unfortunately, the computer is just too smart. It's looking for too unique of a signature out of the knock sensor in order to know that it is knocking, which I guess is a good thing, because then it's very, very unlikely that we could have a crazy scenario like some of you guys explained in the broadcast. Like somebody told a story about a passenger door causing a knock sensor code, motor mounts causing codes. I mean, there's a lot of different things that could cause knock sensor issues, or reduction of power issues because of the ignition advance or the ignition retard problems that come from knock sensor issues. So I guess it's a good thing that our vehicle is very precise or very picky for what it's looking for, right? It's looking for that very small window of that certain frequency and that certain amplitude to come out of that sensor, and everything else is filtered out as noise. The PCM ignores it, which is a good thing, because then, you know, accessories, the AC compressor kicking on doesn't induce knock, doesn't retard the timing, or, you know, whatever. If you're listening to some really loud music and it's got a subwoofer, you know, you don't want that to be translated out as knock, right? So it's good that they are so hyper-specific. It's just unfortunate that we're not able to duplicate that and show you guys the PCM actually retarding the timing. But I can guarantee you that it happens. Take a car that requires premium fuel, put non-premium fuel in it. Go out and do a before and after for ignition timing advance. Look at the PID. you'll see a difference on that vehicle. You might not have a check engine light, but that vehicle will not perform as well, and you will have less ignition advance on that vehicle. So I think that'll do it. This was just a quickie follow-up. Had questions on why the hood was off. This was kind of a hard vehicle to shoot in. I wanted you guys to be able to see with the intake removed and everything, so the hood came off. The cowl does need to be removed. The wiper cowl here does have to come off to pull the intake on these engines, but the hood obviously could have stayed in place. But due to trying to get you guys the right angle in there from above, we pulled that off. But if you're doing this at home, if you're doing this in the shop, leave the hood on. There's really no sense in pulling it unless you're trying to get a good camera angle in there. But yeah, the cowl does have to come off. Really, all in all, not a bad job at all. You can sell your customer some spark plugs right away while you're in there. Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, this was really just an open circuit harness issue with our harness here. You know, both sensors did test out fine, but that's a conversation between you and the vehicle owner, or if you are the vehicle owner, you know, you're already that far in. You have to replace gaskets. If you have to go back in there, it's probably worth putting NOx sensors in right away. All right? So I really appreciate it. Thank you for watching. I appreciate everybody who came out yesterday and supported the live broadcast. If you didn't catch it live, make sure to go back and watch it now and try to join us on April 4th for our next one. We go live at 11 a.m. Central Time, April 4th, Thursday morning. So I hope to see you there. And until then, everybody have a great weekend. And we'll see whoever I see at the TST event coming up at the end of the month. So happy wrenching, everyone. Thank you.